There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to seeking asylum, and because there are misconceptions, there's a lot of lies that go around about asylum seekers, the process, and that is a shortcut to hating a bunch of people who don't necessarily deserve the hate. This is something that the right wing have been exploiting for a very, very long time. So in this video, I want to break down in simplistic terms as I could possibly do what an asylum seeker is and the system for the United Kingdom. Before we get into it, if you do like my content, likes, shares, comments are greatly appreciated. So too are subscribes. If you want to help me and support me any further, my music is under Go North. It's practically everywhere, but YouTube is the best. And if you want to buy something, of course, my books, Loki, God of Rage, and The Wizard, the Alpaca, and The Treasure Hunter are all on Amazon, and that last one is on Audible. I worked with a very, very talented voice actor to bring those characters to life. Yeah, let's get into it. So, starting at the beginning, an asylum seeker is just someone who has a claim. That claim is, I am not safe in my home country. Now that could be for any wide number of reasons. It could be because they are part of the LGBTQ plus community and that country is not too nice towards those individuals. It could be because they are Christian in a country that is not particularly nice to Christians. It could be because there is a war going on. Whenever that one is brought up, especially on places like TikTok or generally speaking anywhere around the internet, you'll always get a stream of men going, I would stand and fight, which tells me one of two things. Either they've not really thought about the situation or they watch way too many movies. Because in a lot of cases, like, who are they going to be fighting? The tyrannical government that has tanks and you don't? Or the invaders who both of these sides want to take you off the board? There's a reason why people go, not my fight, I'm out. There's a reason for it. Or it could be that you are the only male child of a family and a tyrannical government or fraction that controls the area is coming to either recruit you, and if they can't recruit you, coming to take you off the board because that's the safest option. There's a lot of reasons why someone would seek asylum. That, of course, is not an extensive list, but it just gives a taste of why someone would leave and claim asylum in another country. Now, the United Kingdom does not take all that many asylum seekers. We just don't. We get drip-fed this figure here and that figure there, but the reality is because of where we are, we really don't take all that many asylum seekers. We never really have. We've seen this increase since we left the European Union, and there's reasons for it, which are not really worth getting into at this point. But it's a fair comment to say that the asylum system in the United Kingdom is busted. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you the two biggest things that would fix the asylum system in the United Kingdom. Now, different countries will have different means about going to it, and time was, before we left the European Union, if you had someone who wanted to seek asylum in the United Kingdom, they would get to the first territory in the EU. Quite often it's Turkey, maybe it's Greece, that sort of area. I know Turkey's not part of the EU, but roll with me. And you'd have, say, 1,000 people, right? So we're just making up numbers at this point. 1,000 people turn up on the shores of Greece one morning and say, hey, we're all here to claim asylum, blah, blah, blah. 900 of those people say, yep, we want to claim asylum in France, or in Germany, or in Greece, or in Italy, wherever. But 100 of those people say, I want to claim asylum in good old Blighty. This is my reason for it. Well, when we were part of the European Union, it was simple as anything because the investigation would already start. Remember, asylum is just the claim. It is up to the host nation to investigate that claim to see if that claim is legitimate or not. If it's not legitimate, then the asylum seeker is no longer classed as an asylum seeker and they are classed as an illegal immigrant and deported back to country of origin. If the claim is legitimate and is successful, then we give them refugee status. But for the UK, when we were in the EU, if 100 people said that they wanted to come to the UK to claim asylum, the EU would start the investigation process. They would take the fingerprints, they would take the biometrics, they would do the little bits. They wouldn't do everything, but they would do enough to get the ball rolling so that they could then just turn around to the United Kingdom and say, hey, we've got these people over here. We've already started the investigations. So far, we've not found anything alarming, but carry on with your own investigations. These are now your responsibility because you are a signatory of the Refugee Convention Act from the 1950s and the subsequent legislation. And then we take over, we'd investigate. And if the claim is successful, as I said, they become refugees in the United Kingdom, given settled status and permission to stay here indefinitely. If the claim is rejected, because it is by our standards and no one else's, our standards, we find that their claim is not sufficient to grant them refugee status, then we send them back to country of origin. As we've left the European Union, we no longer have that. So we have to wait until an asylum seeker comes to this country. Now, the last time I looked, there were 3 countries that you could start your asylum process before physically being in this country. You had Hong Kong, you had Ukraine, and I want to say the third one is Syria, but I'm not 100% on that just yet. Now, I don't think Syria is still thrown into that category, so I think at the moment it is still just Hong Kong and Ukraine. We had a scheme for a short while to allow Afghanis to start their asylum process before they actually get to this country. But I don't think that scheme at the moment is currently active. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below. But at the moment, I don't think that scheme is active. Now, this causes a massive wave of problems because you have to investigate an asylum seeker. You can't just take their word for it. But we don't allow anyone to start their asylum claim, aside from the countries just mentioned, unless they're physically in the United Kingdom. They can't go to an embassy, because that's not how you seek asylum. You have to physically be in the United Kingdom. Now, this is where complications come through, because for the majority of countries that someone would be seeking asylum from, you have to have a visa in order to gain entry to this country. We don't give out asylum visas. So if someone tries to get on a plane to fly into Gatwick or Heathrow, Luton, whatever, the airline will not let that person board the plane because they don't have the correct documentation, and that airline will get a fairly hefty fine for every one person they allow to do it. So that also is assuming that the asylum seeker has a passport, which, remember, a passport is a privileged bit of documentation. So like a lot of cases, they just don't have them to begin with. But even if they have that, they can't get a visa. And let's also remember what the visa process is. That's me asking that government to talk to my government to give me permission to go there. If you are fleeing a country because the government is a threat to you, as the overwhelming majority of asylum charities will say, you probably shouldn't be doing something that silly-billy, right? It's just not the smart thing to do, because you're effectively telling the government, hey, I'm looking to Scarpa, and they're the ones that you're running from. That's also why a number of asylum seekers, if they do have documentation, a lot of charities will say, don't take it with you. Because if you're caught before you leave your country and you've got your paperwork on you, you're fucked. Jim, the asylum seeker, crosses the channel. Now, unfortunately, and again, as someone who lives on the coast, a lot of asylum seekers don't make the journey. France does their job, and they do try to stop as many people from crossing as possible. But here's the problem with that. If I'm Jim, and my intention is to get to Old Blighty because, family member helped the British Army, and the Conservative government told the Taliban that my family helped the British Army, if I can't go today, I'm going to wait for tomorrow. If I can't go tomorrow, I'm going to wait for the next day. If I can't go the next day, I'm going to wait for the day after, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. These people don't want to stay in France. They're going to try and find a way over. But let's say that Jim the Asylum Seeker does manage to cross the channel. He lands in good old Blighty and then presents himself to the government. Now, keep in mind that an action is legal or illegal, and that's based on legislation and intent. A human being cannot be legal or illegal. It's why I get irked when someone refers to asylum seekers or people in general as illegals. Like, no, that's the propaganda that the Austrian man had back in the 30s. Like, we don't need to be repeating history. So, as a bit of context, it may be illegal to arrive in this country via irregular means, but it depends on intent. Much like if someone is choking and you come up and you quabosh them right on the back, that's not assault because they were choking. You've saved their life. The same if you give CPR to someone. If you start doing compressions, there's a very high chance that you're going to crack someone's sternum, but you're not going to get into trouble for it because you've saved their life. Now, if there's no issue, if they're not choking, if you don't have to administer CPR, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But that's where the intent comes from. Is the intent to seek asylum? If the answer is yes, then they have to present themselves to the authorities within a reasonable time. And again, someone who lives on the coast, quite often they come up to shore and then they just sit and they wait for the authorities to come. If they were to just scarper into the country and not present themselves to the authorities, we can then say illegal immigrant. But it's also important to note that an illegal immigrant statistically is more likely to be someone who has come here on a student visa. That visa has expired. They have not addressed the situation. They have not resolved the situation for whatever the reason. Then they're illegal immigrants. A good way to think about it is if you are in a country without that government's knowledge or consent, you're an illegal immigrant. If the government knows that you're there and consents to you being there, you're not an illegal immigrant. So, Jim the Asylum Seeker has come to good old Blighty, landed on the shores of Dover, looked up at the white cliffs and of the lovely castle and gone, done it, awesome, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to wait for authorities to come pick me up, and said authorities come and pick him up. So this is where typically a lot of hate comes towards asylum seekers, because then people are told that they get housing, they get 5-star hotels, except they don't, because the star rating of a hotel determines the level of service that you get. And the reason why we have to use hotels is because the last 2 years of the Conservatives under Rishi Sunak, they just stopped processing claims. The Conservative mindset is, I'm not using that thing over there, so let's cut it because we don't need it. But when you cut government departments, that means everyone else has more work. That leads to backlogs, and that's exactly what we had. For 2 years, we just weren't able to process any claims. So while normally, in ideal situations, you're looking 6 months to a year, it can take 2 years, it can take 3 years, it can take 4 years. There's no real knowing of how long the investigation is going to take, especially as now we have to start from day one and we don't really get a lot of help from our EU counterparts. Sure, we can request information, but it's very different to what we had before and it's a lot more time consuming. So if there's no room in an asylum centre, it goes to a hotel. And here's the thing with the hotels. Sure, they may have been 5-star at one point, but they ain't that now. The food there is, shockingly terrible. It is. Effectively, it's the leftover of kids' school dinners. It is just not fit for purpose. And one of the good things about doing these videos on TikTok is that I do have people reach out to me and say, hey, I work in this, I work in that, and here's the background information. And that's all been incredibly valuable to correcting people's information here. Now, if they live in a hotel and they have food provided for them, well, that means they get less than £10 a week for things like toiletries and everything else. If they're in a B&B or a processing centre and food is not provided, then they get a bit more. But again, keep in mind, they have to buy food with that money, and food is expensive. I believe it's less than 50 quid a week, and my fat ass definitely eats more than 50 quid a week. So they're in this situation. They're not allowed to work, otherwise they are potentially violating terms and conditions of their asylum process, and they will be deported. Now, in the meantime, Asylum Gym has to be easily accessible for their asylum representative, their legal support, their solicitor, which does mean a lot of times that they do have to have a phone. Now, during the pandemic, the government did issue phones to asylum seekers. Before and since then, they've been given by charities, and it is an important distinction. They could get closed, but they are quite often given by charities. Hell, let's say that old Asylum Jim actually gets his refugee status. He then doesn't get a house. He gets 28 to 30 days to put his bid in for a house. And we do unfortunately know that a significant number of asylum seekers don't actually get any properties. They end up on the street. One of the reasons why asylum seekers will pick this country over France or Germany is because they have friends or family in this country to begin with. So for those particular individuals, not the end of the world. They can just go sofa surfing for a little bit, but it's not ideal. But still, the majority of asylum seekers who request social housing do not get it. They just don't. There isn't a priority when it comes to asylum seekers and housing. There just isn't. It's one of those delightful myths that gets spread around, but people very rarely fact check so that other people can make you very angry at, oh my God, these asylum seekers, they get all these things. No, they don't. They really don't. And if the asylum seeker claim is rejected, then they are sent back to country of origin, wherever that may be. Some countries issue penalties for it. There are particular crimes, because under that, if the asylum claim is rejected, then what they've done in arriving here in a small boat is no longer a protected action. It then does become an offence, and it is up to the state to determine how they want to go about it. But more often than not, we just deport them. Now, I don't know how long this video is going to be, because obviously I'm going to have to cut parts out, but I've been talking about this for like 20 minutes, and I've given the simplest of dumbed down versions of asylum. People have to come here in a dinghy because airlines will not take them. Ferries will not take them. We cannot investigate the asylum claim until said person is physically in the United Kingdom. So they have to come here via small boats. They have to come here via dinghies. France is doing what it can to stop that, but they can only do so much. If I'm in France and I want to go to the UK, I can't go today. Okay, I'm gonna come back tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning I can't go. Okay, I'm gonna come back Friday. Friday. I'm gonna come back Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. And I'm gonna come back every single day because I don't want to stay here. I want to go over there. They can only do so much. But if you want to fix the system, Labour, if you want to fix the system, there's two things that you can do. And these things are very, very easy. Very, very, very easy. The first thing you can do is you can allow asylum seekers to work while their claim is being processed. A number of countries allow asylum seekers to work. It's not forcing them to do so. It's allowing them to do so. If they have the certain skill set, obviously no jobs where they're around vulnerable people because they're still being investigated, but there's a lot of jobs that they could do. They are sneakily trying to do jobs. We could allow them to do that. And then that 0.5% that we allocate to the asylum process doesn't even cost that much. And the second thing we could do, and this would stop the boats damn near overnight, is we could allow asylum seekers, regardless of where they're claiming asylum from, to start their process before they're in the United Kingdom. The French government said a few years ago that if we wanted to open up a processing centre in northern Calais, they would be okay with it. So we could do that. Now, we couldn't run the whole asylum claim from northern France, but we could investigate to a certain point where we feel confident that it's probably a legit claim, or at least where we don't think that the individual is a threat to the United Kingdom. And then we could send them over to Old Blighty, where we could finish the investigation. That would stop the boats overnight, like that. Because at that point, if anyone does cross the channel in a small boat, in a dinghy, whatever it might be, we could then turn around and say, actually, our asylum process is that you go to this building in northern France, and that's how you start it. You don't come here on a dinghy. You have committed an offence. Your claim has been rejected. As simple as that.